Welcome to the Piston Fanatic. I'm your host, Dave Dalton, and I'm excited to share my passion and perspective of our Detroit Pistons as we go on this fantastic voyage together. I've been a diehard Piston fan since the days of Dave Bing and Bob Lanier. Well, Piston fans, I have some exciting news for you. The great John Beilein, Hall of Fame coach at the University of Michigan, and who just got done serving as the Detroit Pistons senior advisor for player development, has agreed to come on our podcast and be a guest, and I am thrilled. That's going to be so exciting. It could happen as early as next week. I will be keeping you informed about this. But today's episode, we are going to talk about what this upcoming season is all about. We're going to talk about the challenges Monty Williams is going to have with the lineup and Summer League and what we're looking forward to in the Summer League. So the first thing we're going to talk about what the upcoming season is about is Cade Cunningham. And again, everybody knows he is our potential star player and the player that's going to drive our franchise. And unfortunately, I think in my mind, the rebuild got pushed back at least like a half a year because of the injuries to Cade. So it's not just it's his development and the development of Cade and Ivey and Duren and Ausar, those four players, that's our nucleus. I mean, obviously it's going to change. I'm sure that all four of those probably won't be probably on the team exactly when we become a great team like I think we will. But the development of those four players is the key to our franchise becoming a good one. But Cade is the number one person. And so, interesting thing though, Cade is, he missed his rookie season. Unfortunately, he was injured, missed all the preseason, missed preseason practice and the preseason games and the first 5 games or so of the regular season. So he came in, for a rookie, he came in like behind the 8 ball. And so he got off to a terrible start, especially his 3-point shooting, but he came on strong at the end. And then what happens his second year, he plays 12 games and gets injured. And so he didn't get a chance to develop. Players have to develop. I've mentioned this before. Somebody asked Steph Curry and Draymond Green, when did you feel like you were ready to contribute to winning? And they said, my 3rd or 4th year. And so these guys are, this is really going to be Cade's 2nd year by all accounts. It'll be Ivey and Duren's 2nd year. So they need this time. They need to have time to make mistakes and get better, and that's what this next upcoming season is about. So after the end of the season, next year at around this time, Cade will be eligible for the rookie max 5-year extension. And we just have seen that Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, and Therese Halliburton just received that. And it's like $260 million for 5 years, which is huge. But I'm thrilled. I'm hoping Cade proves it. Again, he needs to play this year. He needs to show that he's that good. But that is our priority above everything, are those 4 players, Cade, Ivey, Duren, and Ausar, and their development and their improvement. And again, every year that you play, that gives you that opportunity to get better. And the league has shown you that all the great players, I've mentioned it before, like every great player that's won a championship, they did it on like age 27. And so our guys are quite a ways from that. But let's talk about the rotation, because I'm going to tell you, I would not, I would love to be in Monty Williams' shoes, especially the amount of money he's making, but he is going to be challenged. I mean, there's players. I mean, we had the worst record in the league, but the players that are on our roster, we have so many players that have an argument for getting to play major minutes, and it will be impossible. All these guys are not going to be able to get minutes that they need. So let's just look at the point guard position. So obviously we want the ball in Cade's hands. So he needs to be playing a majority of the time. I said at least 32 minutes in the last episode. And I'm sure some games I want to see him play 34 minutes. So, that eats up a lot of it. So we have this backup, Monty Morris, who is an elite backup point guard in the NBA. I believe that Monty Morris would be a backup point guard on a championship team. He could be. He's that good. He doesn't ever turn the ball over. He's a solid defender, and he's an outstanding shooter. Shot, about 38% on threes. So, but my thing was, before we got Monty Morris, I wanted Ivey to have all of the, I wanted him staggered with Cade, and so when Cade was taking his break rest, I wanted Ivey to have the ball, and Ivey showed that he could do that this last year. So that Ivey is a great example of how much you can improve by getting to play, and it is a reality that Ivey got to show us so much more potential because of the fact that Cade got injured. Obviously, we didn't want Cade to get injured, but we never would have known that Ivey could be such a great playmaker, and he improved so much on his shooting. And he got a chance to shoot and got a chance to do that playmaking way more than he would have had Cade been around. So then we have Killian, and again, Killian, he had 3 years to try chance. Not, something could happen this year. He could impress Monty. He could come out and have a great training camp, and then get some minutes, and then play great. Like again, he did it for like a month and a half, kind of in the 2/3 of the way through this past season. But other than that, he has been terrible shooting, and even though his ball handling's good, pretty good, and his defense is good, he's still. I'll tell you, Burks for the Knicks. Burks played point guard one year when they had a really good team, and even though he's not a point guard, but if you needed him to play some minutes at point guard, you can. Same thing with Sasser that we just drafted. He can play point guard. He's only 6'1". So that's 6 guys to play the point guard position, which Cade should be eating up most of those minutes. So who's going to get minutes there? I just don't see that there's more minutes. Whatever Cade doesn't play, I would think that probably Monty Morris is going to get almost all those minutes. So, and at the 2 guard, obviously Ivey, we want him to play a majority of those minutes, but we got to have time. Burks is a big time player. Burks is an NBA excellent rotation player. He shot the lights out for us last year, and he's a smart player. He's a solid defender. He's got good size, and so he needs to play. Again, we can trade him. I'm shocked that nobody has wanted to so far, because I think that he could be a really good player coming off the bench for a championship team. I mean, that's how good Troy's got these guys, and they're not just throw-ins. They're not just like Kojo or Hamadou or different guys. These guys are guys that would be good off the bench on any winning team. So after Ivey and Burks, then there's Sasser. And here's another thing. So if you're going to have Cade and Ivey start, and you want to say you wanted to have Monty Morris come off your bench and play with Sasser, who's an unbelievable tough defender, and an outstanding 3-point shooter, but him and Sasser, Monty Morris is barely 6'2", and Sasser is like 6'1", so I'm not sure how. I mean, I know Sasser can guard bigger guys. He's got a 6'7" wingspan and stuff, but still, it's hard to imagine there's not many 6'1" or 6'2" guys playing in the NBA anymore. And then we're going to go out there and have 2 of them out on the court at the same time. So it might work, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. So there's the 2 position, and then we have Bogey on the 3, small forward, Bogey, and we got Harris that we just traded for. That's one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA, and our number 5 pick, Ausar Thompson. So how are we going to get those guys minutes at that? And obviously, and then Livers can play the 3. So there's not near enough minutes. Bogey needs to play. Will probably play 30 minutes if he doesn't get traded, and Ausar has to play. We have to play him this year. We're not going for the championship or we're not a sure thing to make the playoffs. We have to find out this year if he can play. I believe with all my heart that we can still win and give him minutes and help him develop. And it just is going to be fascinating. He could play the 2. He could play the 1. He could even fill in at the 4. He's 6'7", and he's got 7-foot wingspan, and he's a freak athlete. I do want to say this. I think most people I've heard think that the starting lineup probably would be Cade, Ivey, Bogey, Stu, and Duren. And that maybe will be. So especially if Stu makes the 3-point shots at a good clip. So, but I still believe that no lineup is set in stone. I think that people want to slot everybody into one position and keep them there. But, I mean, we can certainly run various lineups out there. We can still, on occasion, I know a lot of people hate this, play 2 bigs. We can run out Duren and Bagley together, or Duren and Weissman together for maybe only for 10 minutes a game. I mean, it doesn't have to be a long time. Monty can look at the matchups. Monty can see how it works. And the same thing we can play. I think we could play Cade, Ivey, Bogey, Ausar, and Duren. Those guys all, we would be a little bit undersized, which we got killed last year. But Cade's an elite rebounder for a point guard. Ivey had a lot of really good rebounding games. Bogey's not a great rebounder, but Stu rebounds. I mean, Duren's a phenomenal rebounder. So I still think that there's lineups that we could use, and we could use, Monty can be creative with his lineups. We have a lot of players that have, potential to do a good job. Again, it is impossible. With the players we have currently on our roster, there is no way that he is going to be able to give everybody the minutes they deserve. And I know as a high school coach, it's a whole different level. There's 4 different levels below the NBA, but it was still a challenge. Sometimes, you'd have a guy, 2 players that were close. Who knows who's better between Wiseman and Beilein, and all three of you can't play Duren, Wiseman, and Beilein if they're all going to play the 5 and give everybody enough minutes. So you got to kind of decide: am I going to play? I mean, I assume Duren is a lock. In my mind, he is, and then Wiseman and Beilein. Beilein was terrific last year at times. He was our best player. There were games he rebounded better than he had the prior year. He tore up on the boards for some games. He had a stretch where we won those 2 games on a West Coast trip where he shot like 11 for 14 in those 2 games, and we won those 2 games. And a lot of it had to do with how efficient he was. But anyway, let's talk the 4 position. So the big thing is we've been trying to develop Stewart there, and he's really let the 3 ball fly last year, and he had some mixed results. He had some good stretches and some bad stretches, but that will depend on how much he gets to play or whether he starts, is how efficient he shoots the 3. Livers, again, he's a really good defender. He's an outstanding 3-point shooter. It's what every team needs. He moves the ball quite well, but what is going to happen? He could be definitely an odd man out and not get to play many minutes at all. But at the 4, we don't have many players, so there is our one position of need. We're overstocked at the point guard. We have more than enough shooting guards and small forwards and centers. But the 4 position is where we are in need. If we can get a trade or next year's draft or free agency, we definitely, before we're going to ready, we need to come up with a 4, unless we do find out that Stewart is going to be the one, or maybe this year we'll find out Beilein or Wiseman can play. Probably not, but there's always a possibility. So that is going to be challenging for Monty Williams, and to keep everybody happy and to keep that locker room happy when there's so many players that can and need to play. But we've seen it happen. The injuries come into play, and so even like if we go into the season with Duren, Wiseman, and Beilein, for example, it seems like always one of those guys was hurt, and Stewart was injured a lot last year too. So then in that case, we'll have enough players. We'll have those guys can, rotate in and out. So, I still, like I said, I don't think that we need to have players locked into one position. I think that even when you have guys out there, you could say that Bogey's the 3, but then you might want to have him guard the other team's 4. Matchups are what it's all about, and sometimes just because you're shorter or taller, obviously, Cade's a point guard. If Sasser comes in, we're going to want him to guard the other team's quick little point guards. And so that's, you got to be flexible with that. And I think that I'm confident that Monty will. But again, his job is challenging and is going to be impossible. Ausar and just needs to play, and I know his shooting is going to be a big thing, but it's going to be hard because if he comes in there and they leave him wide open, which they're going to do in the NBA, they're going to go behind screens on him, they're going to segue off him, and he's, we're going to want him to shoot, and if he misses 4 in a row, then what's going to happen? And we're trying to win. Again, we are going to try to win more than we did in previous years, and then he's not going to get minutes, and he can, you lose confidence, and then all of a sudden you got this guy that has a lot of potential that's not getting a chance to develop. Um, we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I think that Monty and Harris and Bogey and Burks, again, I said they could be really good rotation players on winning championship teams or playoff teams. So, they have really good contracts. So it would not surprise me if there's a trade in the works early in the season. And it's all about accumulating assets. Assets are a big thing. We don't have a lot of assets. We don't have a lot of draft capital like like Utah has all those picks they got from the Timberwolves, and they got all those picks they got from the Cavs, all those first round picks. They got like 3 or 4 from each team. So they got millions of first round picks. So they can use those to make trades, and they have. And it gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of potential to make big moves. And that's, what it's about by getting and even drafting young players. How many times do you see? So the Cavs, they felt like they were ready to make the big move. They had Mobley and they had a good young nucleus of guys. And so then they thought they were ready for the big move, and they traded for Donovan Mitchell, and they traded 3 first-round picks, and they traded a bunch of good players. That they didn't think were going to be as good as they've turned out to be, some of them. And so, but now, who knows? They didn't even do that well this year. And the Timberwolves, they were a disaster. They threw all their cards in to get Rudy Gobert, and they had a disastrous year. And so now what are they going to do? They have like no way out of it. So maybe they didn't think they were doing it too early, but I'm just saying you can do it too early. But the Suns, they got to get Kevin Durant. Why did they get to get Kevin Durant? Because they had Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson that were young assets that they drafted and developed. And then when the time came, they were ready to go for the championship with Booker. And now they were able to add Bradley Beal, and they used no assets to get him, which was kind of not fair, but it happened. So anyway, we have to keep trying to accumulate assets, and hopefully we can swing a trade and even trade 2 guys for 1, because our roster is too full, and there's not, like I said, there's not enough minutes for all these guys to play. So we'll see what happens. We do have the mid-level exemption that we could use. It's like $7.9 million, and I'm not sure we're going to want to. I mean, obviously, if there was a 4 that we thought could really, even play backup for and was really going to be a good player. And it can happen because, now the money's kind of dried up. And so there might be some players available that, I don't want Grant Williams. He's undersized for a 4. He is a 4. He's not exceptionally quick or fast, and he can shoot threes on occasion, but, that's not who I'm wanting to get. So anyway, I'm saying that I'm not sure that we should use the MLE because look I just went through our roster, and we don't have enough minutes for the guys that we have already, and we need to find out how good those guys are before we worry about adding another guy. Because if you think that we should jump in ahead of ourselves and try to win and get to, again, I shared that, the Chicago Bulls, they went all in, and now they're stuck in no man's land. And even the Timberwolves, they've cashed in all their chips, and now, I guess they can trade Karl Anthony Towns and maybe get something, but they are not in a good position. So, shout out to Kojo. He signed with the Warriors. Good for him. I even thought he could be a solid backup on a really good team, and he might be the 4th guard on that team, but he's smart. He knows how to play. Miles Bridges, who got in that trouble, some legal trouble, and I guess they probably didn't offer him much, but he ended up taking the $7.9 million qualifying offer, and he's just going to play 1 year and become a free agent. So anyway, I'm going to talk about Piston history, and again, I have this perspective because I've been a Piston fan, since the late 60s. So I got to see a lot of losing teams and a lot of poor teams, but Joe Dumars, a lot of people still trash him. He did do some bad things at the end of his career, but he did. I mean, he assembled a team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals 6 years in a row. And how many people get to do that? And I was along for that ride, and I loved going along for that ride. And even though we didn't win the championship only once, we should have won it the second time if Rashid wouldn't have doubled off Robert Ory and left him open for a wide open three. We would have won that series. But anyway, he did an amazing job, and we were blessed to be able to go to the Eastern Conference Finals. To have your team be that good and that relevant that many years in a row, that's what we want this team to be. That's why we want to be patient. That's why we want to develop these players. I mean, that's a different way of developing a team than what Joe did to put that team together. But we want to develop a team that can go to the Eastern Conference Finals 6 years in a row. So we can't become desperate. So what happened at the end of Joe's career is the Pistons weren't any good. We had some money, we had cap space and free agency, but we weren't going to get any great players. We weren't going to come to Detroit and play on a crappy team. So we had the money, and so we got Ben Gordon. Ben Gordon scored like 60 points against the Celtics. He played for the Bulls in a playoff game, and he's an undersized guard, but he could light it up. But we overpaid him, and he wasn't that good. And then at the same year, we got Charlie Villanueva, and Charlie put up some good stats for Toronto, and then he went to Minnesota or Milwaukee, and he put up good stats there. But there's something about Charlie that he looks, he had some condition where he had no eyebrows and his head was shaved and stuff. But he was an unusual player. There was a reason why so many teams gave up on such a young player. He could score like 17 points and get 7 rebounds. I remember looking back at the same time, he wasn't that different in age from Chris Bosh, and his stats weren't that much difference, but yet Chris Bosh ended up going to be a Hall of Famer, and Charlie ended up being, bouncing around and not being that successful. But Joe was desperate. We were going nowhere, so he did the best that he could. He knew that his job was in jeopardy, so he took a chance and signed those guys to these long-term contracts for more money than they were worth, and then it just, stuck us in mediocrity for even a longer time. Stan Van Gundy, he kind of developed that team that was pretty good with Tobias Harris and those guys, and I like that team, but they were never going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals. But they lost one year in the first round to the Cavaliers, who won the championship in every game, all 4 games that were close. But after that, that team went downhill. So what did he do? He panicked. He was getting paid $10 million because he was getting paid to be GM and coach. And so he traded for Blake Griffin. And a lot of you probably were excited to get Blake Griffin. At the time, I put on social media, I didn't have a podcast back then, but I said, this is a nightmare. This is terrible. Blake Griffin's always injured. He's getting a max contract. He's too old, and we're going to have to pay him all this money, and it's not going to turn out good for us. And we weren't ready. If that was the one missing piece, and we had a real good roster. So what happens? Blake's injured. He has one phenomenal year. We barely make the playoffs. We don't win a game, and then Blake's injured the rest of his career, and then we end up even pay him not to play, and that was a nightmare. We traded every asset. We didn't have many good assets even, but we traded Tobias Harris, who was our best asset, who went on to be an all-star. We traded him to the Clippers, and he did really well there, and then he got a max contract with Philly, and now he's older, and he's still a good player, but they want to get rid of his contract in Philly. But and then we traded our number 1 draft pick to the Clippers, and who did they draft with that pick? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And then they used Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They traded to get Paul George, so from OKC. And so that's what I'm saying by assets. You have those assets, and you can trade, and then you can get guys. And so, anyway, those are 2 examples of trying to jump ahead and trade people too soon. And it's not where we're at. That's not what we want to do. So. Summer League's coming up, man. It's this week, and I'm so thrilled. And we have our schedule. We're going to play the Magic on ESPN at 5:30 on July 8th. And then we're going to come around again, the big game on the 9th, July 9th against the Rockets. It's going to be on ESPN2, where the Thompson twins are going to square off. And Then we have a game on the 12th on ESPN, and we're going to play the Spurs the 14th. So I kind of doubt that by then that Victor will be playing, and so I hope he is. But there's a lot to see. It's a big opportunity. Like I said, we got Jarrett Jack that's going to coach him. He knows Monty's system. We got Weissman and Duren and Ivey, and besides Ausar and Marcus, not Marcus Morris, but we're gonna have Sasser and all those guys. A bunch of other guys are gonna come in and play too. So, but those other guys, they're gonna, even if they don't play in many of the games, maybe if they'll only play in one summer league game, they're gonna be practicing every day under the direction of those coaches, and that's gonna help speed up our development. So. I used to like to do that in the summer. I played a lot with my high school team. We gained and got better in the summer, and it gave us like a jump start going into the season. So anyway, don't forget John Beilein's coming up. Do something nice for somebody today, and go Pistons.